Okay, picture this. You're 100 feet down, deep in enemy waters. The air is stale, thick with the smell of diesel fuel and sweat. The only sound is the steady, rhythmic ping of sonar. And it's getting closer, louder, faster. You know exactly what it is. It's a Japanese destroyer, a warship built for one reason and one reason only: to find submarines like yours and kill them. Your training, the rulebook, every single survival instinct you have is screaming at you to dive deep, to run, to hide. But what if the only way to live was to do the one thing that should absolutely guarantee your death? This isn't just a story about naval tactics, it's about a complete revolution in thinking, a revolution born from sheer defiance in the crushing darkness of the Pacific Ocean.
For Commander Samuel Dealey and the 78 men crammed into the steel hull of the submarine USS Harder, this question, well, it was everything. On August 24, 1944, as that terrifying pinging sound of their hunter closed in, this wasn't some philosophical debate. It was the final, brutal calculation in a war that they, in their little steel tube, had already helped to redefine. And to really understand the choice they made and the incredible legacy it left behind, we have to go back. We have to understand the world they came from and the rules they were about to completely shatter. All right, so before we can really appreciate the pure genius of breaking the rules, we first have to understand the rules themselves. And for the U.S. submarine force before World War II, the #1 rule was incredibly simple: do not get seen. The entire doctrine, everything they were taught, was built on a foundation of caution. Just look at this. On the left, you've got the pre-war doctrine. The American submarine was basically a scout. Its whole job was to be the eyes of the big battle fleet, lurking around unseen, reporting enemy movements. A commander's career could be made or broken not by how aggressive he was, but by the shine on his boat's brass and his talent for avoiding trouble. Then, in a single morning of fire and smoke over Pearl Harbor, the mission changed overnight, completely. The goal wasn't just to watch anymore. It was to wage unrestricted warfare. It was to sink enemy ships, to cut Japan's arteries of oil and steel. The new mission was total destruction. But here's the thing. You can change a mission with a single radio message. But a culture, a deeply ingrained mindset of caution, that takes a lot longer to change. And right into this world of clashing doctrines steps Samuel Dealey. By all accounts, he was a product of that old-school culture. His first commanding officer literally wrote in his evaluation that he was quiet, not colorful. This was a guy who followed the rules. But war has a way of reforging a person. And for Dealey, 2 absolutely seismic events would burn away that old caution and forge a new, unshakable purpose. First, on Halloween night in 1941, weeks before America was even officially in the war, the destroyer USS Reuben James was torpedoed and sunk by a German U-boat. On that ship was Dealey's close friend, Tex Edwards. So this loss, it was personal. It was visceral. Then, just 5 weeks later, the abstract threat of war became a national nightmare at Pearl Harbor. For Dealey, these 2 events just fused together into a single, clarifying purpose. This war was no longer just an officer's career path for him. It was a personal crusade. He immediately requested a transfer back to the submarine service, not for scouting, but for combat. And he was given command of a brand new fleet submarine, the USS Harder. Now, the Harder's first patrols were anything but glorious. They were a brutal education in the realities of war at sea. The sub's engines were notoriously unreliable, a constant source of crippling anxiety. And on their very first patrol, they had a terrifying, near-fatal run-in. A Japanese destroyer, the ultimate submarine killer, hunted them down, dropping depth charges with chilling precision. The explosions were so close, they actually drove the Harder's bow deep into the muddy seafloor, trapping them. And this right here? This is the moment where everything changes. Imagine it, trapped on the bottom, in the dark, the hull groaning under the pressure, the crew holding their breath, waiting for the final blast. Dealey and his men worked frantically to break free. And they did it. They survived the absolute worst-case scenario. But Dealey came away with more than just his life. He gained a profound insight, an epiphany born from sheer terror. He realized that the destroyer's greatest strength, its relentless, aggressive charge straight at a sub's last known position, was also its most predictable, most exploitable weakness. So what do you do? The book, the training, everything says you dive, you change course, you pray. You present the smallest possible target and try to slip away into the silent deep. But having stared right into the abyss and come out the other side, Dealey started to work on a new, terrifyingly simple, and utterly forbidden answer to this question. He came up with what we now call the down-the-throat shot. The logic was this insane high-stakes gamble. A destroyer, when it's on its final attack run, has to hold a straight course. It becomes predictable. So instead of running away from the charging enemy, Dealey decided to turn towards it, to face his hunter head-on, fire a spread of torpedoes straight down its throat, and then crash dive underneath the charging warship just as his torpedoes hit home. It was madness. And on April 13, 1944, against the destroyer Ikasuchi, he put this insane theory to the test.
Now, this is maybe my favorite part of the whole story. This is the actual report Dealey sent back, a primary source, his own words, radioed to headquarters. Just think about what just happened. He executed a maneuver that defied decades of doctrine, a move that should have been suicide. He stared death in the face, and he won. And his report? 8 words. Expended 4 torpedoes and 1 Jap destroyer. No drama, no exclamation points. The sheer, concise confidence in that message tells you everything you need to know about the man's transformation. The quiet, not colorful officer was long gone. In his place was a commander with ice water in his veins. The Ikasuchi sank in under 5 minutes.
So, having proved his tactic worked, you'd think Dealey would be satisfied, right? But he wasn't just interested in surviving anymore. He was on the offensive. He actively lobbied his command for what was arguably the single most dangerous assignment in the entire Pacific theater, to patrol the waters around Tawi-Tawi. This was the main naval anchorage for the combined Japanese fleet. It was the Hornet's Nest, a place just swarming with the very destroyers he was now uniquely qualified to kill. The result was the Harder's 5th War Patrol, which became the stuff of absolute legend in the submarine force. In a stunningly short period of time, just a few days, this is the number of Japanese destroyers the Harder was credited with sinking: 5. He wasn't just defending himself anymore. He had taken his revolutionary idea and turned his submarine into a purpose-built destroyer-killing machine, actively hunting the hunters in their own backyard. And here is the payoff. This is why the story is so much bigger than just one submarine. Dealey's actions had a massive strategic ripple effect. The Japanese fleet commander at Tawi-Tawi, reeling from the sudden, completely inexplicable loss of his screening destroyers, became convinced he was surrounded by an entire American submarine wolf pack. He panicked, and he ordered the entire fleet to leave port a full day earlier than they had planned. This one decision threw their whole complex battle plan, Operation A-Go, into chaos. It meant their carriers sailed right into the guns of the American fleet in what would become the Battle of the Philippine Sea, a disaster for Japan so one-sided that American pilots nicknamed it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The actions of one commander on one submarine directly changed the course of a pivotal battle, and with it, the war itself. So, as you can imagine, word of the Harder's 5th Patrol and Dealey's short, confident reports spread like wildfire through the submarine force. Commanders who had been wrestling with the exact same problem, how do I survive a destroyer attack? They now had an answer. What was once a forbidden, heretical tactic was now being taught and adopted across the entire fleet. It was becoming the new doctrine. But it was so much more than just a tactical shift. It was a psychological one. Before Dealey, the relationship was crystal clear. The destroyer was the predator, the submarine was the prey. That was a fundamental truth of naval warfare. After Dealey, that truth was shattered. For the first time, the hunter had to fear the hunted. A Japanese destroyer captain charging a contact now had to wonder, is the sub below me running away, or is it turning to face me? On August 24, 1944, during his 6th patrol, Samuel Dealey's luck finally ran out. While engaging an enemy escort ship, he executed his signature head-on attack. But this time, for whatever reason, the torpedoes missed. The counterattack from the surface was immediate, and it was overwhelming. The USS Harder, the boat they called Hit 'em Harder, was lost with all 79 hands. You know, a man who lives on the edge, who rewrites the rules of risk, sometimes pays the ultimate price. But his legacy, and his crew's legacy, was already cemented in history. Just look at this record: 16 enemy ships sunk, a presidential unit citation for that legendary 5th Patrol. And for his leadership, his innovation, and his incredible courage, Samuel Dealey was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest award for valor. And in what is just an incredibly poignant final chapter to this story, just this year, the wreck of the Harder was finally found. 80 years after she disappeared, imagery confirmed her location, resting upright and remarkably intact on the dark ocean floor. A silent monument, and the final resting place for the 79 men who changed the way the war was fought. So why does this one commander story matter so much? Because Dealey's innovation was a force multiplier. It took what was already the most effective weapon against Japan and made it even more lethal. I mean, look at this chart. American submarines sank 55% of all Japanese shipping during the war. That's more than planes, more than surface ships, more than mines, more than everything else combined. They were the silent weapon that literally strangled Japan's war effort.
And this wasn't some obscure statistic that historians figured out later. This impact was understood right at the very top. Admiral Bull Halsey, one of the main commanders in the Pacific, he said it plainly. The silent service, as they were known, came first. They were the decisive weapon. And innovators like Samuel Dealey are exactly why.
Ultimately, the incredible story of the USS Harder brings us right back to this fundamental question. And it's not just about history, it's a lesson that applies everywhere. When the existing system isn't working, when the established rules are only leading to failure, sometimes the only path forward is the one that seems the most dangerous, the most counterintuitive, the one that everyone tells you is forbidden. Samuel Dealey's story is this powerful reminder that true innovation often begins at the precise moment someone has the courage to turn around and face the very thing they're supposed to be running from.